Hello, and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host, Rob. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the new weapon properties from the Unearthed Arcana. There we go. That's staying in. Who cares? And they've also released some playtest material for Champion Fighter and the Berserker Barbarian. So we're going to be looking at those in our next few videos. But I thought there's really no point going over the classes without discussing the changes to weapons and weapon properties, since both fighters and barbarians, those are going to be kind of crucial things that we need to discuss first. So this new UA is 50 pages long, making it the longest one I think we've released so far for, I was going to say D&D 1, but they're not calling it that anymore. And it's not 5.5 edition either. Don't worry, guys, it's still 5th edition, even though we've made tons of changes with more changes to come. But it's completely the same edition. Don't worry about it. Don't scratch your heads or anything. Still 5th edition, 5.01 maybe. But that's as far as we can go. Anyways, let's take a look at the weapon properties. One thing to note, well, I'm sure we're gonna get into it in a minute, but they've added things called weapon masteries to every single weapon that appears in the chart. So these are new properties, which if you have the mastery, allows you to do new things with it. If you don't have the mastery, you can still use the weapon, assuming you're proficient, of course. Well, even if you're not proficient, you'll just suck with it. But assuming you're proficient, you can still use the weapon, but without the mastery, you don't get the mastery ability itself. Anyways, before I start scrolling around randomly and making a fool of myself, let's go through what we're actually doing here. So let's take a look at the design note, weapon updates. Each weapon now has a mastery property, a special property that is required to, or that requires a feature to unlock. The mastery properties are described in this document. Short sword is returned to being a martial weapon. The net, which doesn't deal damage, is now adventuring gear rather than a weapon. See adventuring gear below for the item's playtest description, which is good. If anybody ever tried using a net before, they were awful before. Mostly because the range properties were completely screwed up. So anything beyond like 5 feet, I remember, if I'm correct, was long range, giving you disadvantage. But anything within 5 feet, you're using a ranged weapon in melee range, which also gave you disadvantage. So yeah, we kind of had an argument about that one night, and nobody ever used a net since. At least not in our game. I'm sure other people have made the mistake of using a net though. Anyways, the Trident's damage has changed from a D6 to a D8, and its versatile die is now a D10 rather than a D8. That's probably nice. Just looking at a Trident, it really looks like a weapon I wouldn't want to be stabbed with. I mean, not that I want to be stabbed with any weapon, but the fact that it was only a D6 before, and it's got those like prongs and hooks, and it just looks terrible. It looks like way more than a D6 worth of damage. The Lance has the heavy and two-handed properties rather than a special property, which impose disadvantage on some of its attack rolls, and its damage die is changed from a D12 to a D10. Hopefully this makes lances a little more useful when you're not mounted. I always wanted to make like a mounted specialist type of character, and even maybe take like the mounted combatant feat so you can get advantage if you're mounted, and then play like, a champion fighter wouldn't be a bad bet just for the expanded crit range, but I was thinking more along the lines of like a paladin, so you can use summon steed. But then the problem you always have is that, you can't really take your steed through a dungeon, and you might not have room to charge with, and then if you're not using it while mounted, then you had disadvantage, and meanwhile you've got like this magic lance that you've been trying to get, and you've put like everything into it, and it just never really quite. If you were in a campaign where you could guarantee you'd be outdoors like 90% of the time, it would work great. But I never had that assurance. So, my dream of making my ultimate mounted character just never really came about. Anyways, the War Pick now has the versatile property. The musket and pistol, which previously appeared in the Dungeon Master's Guide, now appear in the Martial Weapons range table. As always, the DM oversees what is available for purchase in shops. So if you don't want to have muskets and pistols in your game, you don't have to. But if you do want to, now they're right there in the weapon table instead of hidden somewhere in the Dungeon Master's Guide where 75% of people didn't even know it existed. The light property now appears in the weapons properties section rather than in the glossary. That is probably a major oversight that should have been taken care of all along. The thrown property now allows you to draw a weapon as part of the ranged attack, which is very, very nice as well, because there were always these like weird, like drawing a weapon, storing a weapon, attacking with a weapon type interactions that just made it so much more clumsy and awkward than it needed to be. You know, just be like, yeah, you've got the thrown property, you can draw your dagger and throw it as one, you know, motion kind of thing. Anyways, then we get our chart, which is most of the same. I mean, they've already gone over what the changes were from the previous edition to this, and they list, you know, the masteries, of course, which are all different because those are all new. So, they're not different, they're just new. There we go. And of course, we get the gold piece cost of everything, and we get to see that the great sword is still the most expensive weapon on the planet. Yeah. Oh no, we've got the ranged weapons. Sorry, I forgot about the ranged weapons. Muskets, pistols, and hand crossbows all weighing in more, and even the heavy crossbow and the longbow being the same amount. Alright, the most expensive melee weapon, that's what I should have said. Anyways, weapon properties. Here are properties whose definitions have changed for this playtest. Oh, this is another thing I like. I mean, it's already 50 pages long. You don't have to list all the properties that are the same. I looked at, they just went through and mentioned the ones that were different. You know, why not? Light. When you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon, you can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn. Notice they specified it has to be later, so it has to be after you've already made the other attack. That extra attack must be made with a different light weapon, and you don't add your ability modifier to the attack's extra damage or to the extra attack. Yeah, there we go. Unless that modifier is negative. So if you were using a strength, I guess it'd be a dex character because it's a light weapon, but maybe it doesn't have a finesse property. Who knows? Anyways, if you had an 8, you're looking at a -1, but if you had a 16, you're looking at a +0. That's the point I was trying to make. For example, if you take the attack action on your turn and you have a short sword in one hand and a dagger in the other, each of which has the light property, you can make one attack with each weapon using your action and the bonus action, but you don't add your strength or dexterity modifier to the damage roll of the bonus action unless that modifier is negative. So, I mean, this is mostly unchanged. It's just, you know, it's a little more clear now that, you know, you have to have already made the other attack first. You can't just lead with your bonus action attack. And both weapons have to be light. So, you know, you can't have like a long sword and a dagger. It has to be like a rapier or a short sword or some other form of light weapon. Throwing. If a weapon has the throw-in property, you can throw the weapon to make a ranged attack, and you can draw that weapon as part of the attack. They already mentioned that, but whatever. If the weapon is a melee weapon, you use the same ability modifier for the attack roll and damage roll that you would have used for a melee attack with the weapon. For example, if you throw a hand axe, you use your strength, but if you throw a dagger, you can use either your strength or your dexterity, since the dagger has the finesse property. Alright, good to know. And like I said, I like that, you know, they've clarified that you can just draw the weapon and throw it all in one motion, essentially. Mastery properties. This is the big difference, and this is really why we're making this video, is so we can talk about these. Notice that every weapon now has some sort of a mastery property. It's not like before we'd have, you know, a lot of weapons that just had nothing for properties. Every weapon has something here. So, each weapon now has a mastery property as shown in the weapons table above. That property is usable only by a character who has a feature such as a weapon mastery that unlocks the property for the character. Here are the descriptions of each mastery property. The properties are provided in alphabetical order. If a game feature lets you replace a weapon's mastery property with another one, that weapon must meet any prerequisites specified for the new property. Alright, so starting with cleave. Prerequisite, melee weapon, and heavy property. If you hit a creature with a melee attack using this weapon, you can make an attack roll with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet of the first that is also within your reach. On a hit, the second creature takes the weapon's damage, but don't add your ability modifier to that damage unless the modifier is negative. You can make this extra attack only once per turn. So we do have some conditions besides just the prerequisites. The creature has to be within 5 feet of the one you first hit and within your reach. So it can't be like standing behind it or anything unless you're using like, something with the reach property probably as well. The second creature takes the weapon's damage, but you don't add your ability modifier to that damage unless the modifier is negative. That's kind of what we get from the light as well. You can only make this extra attack only once per turn, but notice that it's part of it's another attack. It's not like a bonus action or anything like that, so that's nice. It leaves your bonus action open, and it only says you don't add your ability modifier. So this and the light property both, let's say you're using a magical weapon. In each of those cases, let's say you had a +2 weapon, you're going to be still adding the +2 bonus. If it had any sort of special properties like flame tongue or anything like that, you're going to be able to add that stuff too. You're just not getting like the strength or dexterity for whichever case this might have been, right? Anyways, pretty good. Cleave sounds quite promising. Flex. Prerequisite versatile property. When you hit with a melee attack using this weapon, you deal its versatile damage even if you're wielding it with one hand. So it is kind of nice. You got a versatile weapon. You don't need to use 2 hands. You can only use one. That leaves you free to use a shield. But I will point out the damage upgrade works out to be like an average of 1 damage per hit, right? Whether you're going from a D4 to a D6, a D6 to a D8, a D8 to a D10, or a D10 to a D12, in every one of those cases, it's an average of 1 extra damage. So even if you're a fighter with, say, 3 attacks a round and you hit on all 3 attacks, you're really looking at 3 extra damage, which is probably going to already put you behind things like Cleave, for example. Especially since Cleave's a great weapon, right? If it was a sword, like a great sword, then that would be an average of 7 damage, and that's only, from 1 hit. If you miss on some of these flex attacks, But I think so the damage-wise, it's not a big upgrade. It's pretty minor, but, it's still better than nothing, I guess. But the main advantage is that you could do so while having your other hand free to, do whatever you need with. Including possibly cast spells. Maybe you don't want to have to worry about, things like that, right? You might just want one hand free. I guess you technically could do that anyways, even if it did have versatile, because you can always release it with one hand and hold it with the other. So never mind, that's a terrible example. Use a shield. That's a good example. Anyways, the graze property. Prerequisite, melee weapon and heavy property. If your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature, you can deal damage to that creature equal to the ability modifier used to make the attack roll. This damage is the same type dealt by the weapon, and the damage can't be increased in any way other than increasing the ability modifier. So, if you had 20 strength and attacked somebody with your greatsword and missed, but you had the graze property, you could still deal 5 damage to them. I mean, that's already, once again, better than 3 hits of flex. That's actually pretty nice. I mean, I wish we had that now with things like Great Weapon Mastery, but of course Great Weapon Mastery is getting changed. We've already known that for a while now. But that sounds like a pretty interesting property to take. I mean, missing sucks, but still dealing damage even when you miss is not so bad. I mean, misses are going to happen no matter what. But this way you can still at least deal something. And notice that it doesn't specify that you can only do it like once per round or something. So to use our previous example, let's say you're a fighter with 3 attacks a round and you missed on all 3 attacks because you're fighting, I don't know, the Tarask or something, or Tiamat or something else ridiculous, you'd still do 15 damage. Granted, it'll probably generate that in a single round, so, once you think about it that way, it's not so great. But point is, you could be dealing damage even when you miss. Nick, prerequisite light property. When you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of as a bonus action. You can still make this extra attack only once per turn. So this is pretty good if you're planning on doing a lot of things with your bonus action. Like I think rogues are a prime example of this. In many of my campaigns, we've had melee rogues who wanted to dual wield, but then you end up having to use your bonus action all the time for your offhand attack, and you're not able to use it consistently for things like cunning action, right? this would free you up where you're still getting that extra attack, but now it's part of the attack action, and your bonus action is now available for other things. It's also good for things like, say, like a swords bard, if you wanted to be a 2-weapon fighting swords bard, because you might have spells you want to do with a bonus action, for example, or you might have subclass features, etc., etc. Anyways, point is, you're still getting the same amount of attacks, and now it's freeing up your bonus action. So, pretty nice. Push. Prerequisite: heavy, two-handed, or versatile property. If you hit a creature with this weapon, you can push the creature up to 10 feet away if it's no more than one size larger than you. Notice that this also isn't restricted to the number of times per round. So if you hit, like, say, 2 times, you can push somebody, push them back 10 feet, you move in, hit them again, push them back another 10 feet. They're only 10 feet from you now because you had to move up, but they're now 20 feet from your party, or maybe even 25 feet, which, might be a really good thing. I like the fact, too, that there's, you get the size restriction, but there's no, saving throw or ability check or anything else to resist it. It's just, if you hit them and you have the mastery, you just push them, So it's much more in line with, say, like a repelling blast or something along those lines, right? Anyways, sap. Prerequisite: no other properties. If you hit a creature with this weapon, that creature is disadvantaged on its next attack roll before the start of your next turn. This is actually pretty funny because you could use a weapon with the sap property and just keep giving them disadvantage on their next attack roll, just every single round. Granted, it's only on the next attack roll, right? So if they had 3 attacks a round, it's only going to apply to the next one, but that's still pretty good. And you can just keep inflicting that round after round after round. Again, no saving throw, no ability check to resist, nothing. So, I kind of like that. Also notice there's a common theme here, which is that a lot of the weapons are getting more than just damage properties to make them useful, right? Really in 5th edition, sure, you might have wanted to have a specific property because maybe you wanted to use a ranged weapon, or maybe you specifically wanted a one-hander because you wanted to use a shield with it. Maybe you're a Hexblade Warlock, so you can only use a one-hander. Anyway, because obviously you only took 1 level of Hexblade Warlock, and, now you're limited to one-handers with your charisma. Whatever, right? We're getting a lot of things with some of these properties that allow you to do things like battlefield control, some more disables and push type things, disadvantage, just a lot of other ways to contribute besides just doing more damage, which is really what most of the weapon properties were in 5th edition. So I quite like this. Anyways, slow. Prerequisite: none. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you can reduce its speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. If you hit the creature more than once with this property, the speed reduction doesn't exceed 10 feet. So even, on that fighter example, if you hit him 3 times, he still only loses the 10 feet. He doesn't lose 30. But, that's still a pretty nice ability. It's decent slow. Again, kind of similar to the Lance of Lethargy that Warlock's got. Topple. Prerequisite: heavy, reach, or versatile property. If you hit a creature with this weapon, you can force the creature to make a Constitution saving throw with a DC equal to 8 plus your proficiency bonus, plus the ability modifier you use to make the attack roll. On a failed save, the creature has the prone condition. So basically, you just knock stuff prone. Note, though, that they do get a saving throw, and it's a Constitution saving throw, which tends to be monsters' best save. Also, if they have legendary resist, then they could use that as well. Also, while prone is great when you're a melee guy, prone sucks when you realize that half your party are ranged fighters who now can't hit the target because you just gave them disadvantage on their attack rolls. That being said, though, it's still not too bad. You can make some really big bursty damage type guys if you're playing, say, with like smites and stuff like that, where suddenly you're doubling your crit chance, and now you're able to knock a guy prone and then follow it up with something that's hopefully going to crit and then deal big damage. Anyways, Vex. Prerequisite: ammunition, finesse, or light property. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. I like this one a lot. Notice that it's just your next attack roll. So it could be on this turn, it could be on your next turn because it lasts until the end of your next turn. This is pretty good. It's also not limited to the number of times you can use it per round. So you could hit a creature on your first attack, giving yourself advantage on the next one, then hit with the Vex property again, and then apply advantage on your next one, to use our fighter with 3 attacks a round example, and then hit again with Vex, giving you advantage on your first attack in the next round. And you just, because the advantage is like kind of feeding itself and just making it more likely for you to hit, you can just keep applying Vex. That is insanely good. It really is. Anyways, we're almost done with the weapons section. As you can see, next comes spells. So we might as well talk about the adventure and gear changes, which apply to the net and the priest pack. So, the net. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can replace one of your attacks with a throw of the net at a creature within 15 feet of you. The target must save on a dexterity saving throw against a DC equal to 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your dexterity modifier. The target succeeds automatically if it's huge or larger. On a failed save, the creature has the restrained condition until it escapes the net. To escape, the target must use its action to make a DC 10 strength athletics check, escaping on a success. A creature within 5 feet of the target can use its action to attempt the same thing, destroying the net to armor class 10, hit points 5, immunity to bludgeoning, poison, and psychic damage, and also freeze the target, ending the effect. So, at first glance, you might be like, okay, well, it's only got armor class 10 and 5 hit points. Like, that's ridiculous. It's pretty much nothing. And that's true. But it says that that's only though a creature within 5 feet can attempt its action to do the same thing. Oh no, you can destroy the net regardless. I was about to say that the person trapped in the net can't do that. But no, I'm fake news. You can do that. So it does take its action if it wants to make a strength athletics check. Honestly, you're probably just better off wasting one of your attacks to destroy it. But even still, that's the attack that got used, Certain creatures hit pretty hard and might only have like 1 or 2 attacks around, right? So, theoretically, just constantly throwing nets on it could rob it of its ability to fight back, I guess. That is kind of funny. Overall, it's still better than what we used to get. Now, it does have the saving throws, and we already just discussed that under the topple ability, and frankly, this is in some ways worse, but restraint isn't a bad thing, so definitely not bad. Either way, it's better than what the net used to be. So anyways, priest pack. Cost 33 gold pieces, weight 29 gold, or 29 gold pieces, 29 pounds. Priest pack contains the following items: backpack, blanket, lamp, holy water, rations, robe, and tinderbox. So, darn it, I should have looked this up before. I don't actually know what the priest pack used to have. Oh, my player's handbook guide is in the card. Oh well, who cares? Not that important. Either way, they give us an updated list of what all's in there. Maybe we didn't have robes before. That would be awkward if you were a priest. Who knows? Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. My next video, we're not going to worry too much about the spells. I mean, they have made some changes, which is nice. We'll probably cover that maybe in a different video. But the next video, we are going to start taking a look at the actual changes to Fighter and Barbarian. And hopefully by then we have Monk, so we can just cover all the warrior class groups entirely. But anyways, that's everything. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye.